Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Training Talk right here on Personal Defense Network. This is the show where we talk about you, well, about your life and how to protect it. In the next hour, we're going to discuss how you can train and prepare yourself to face your own worst case scenario and keep you and your family safe from harm. Now, we don't do religion or politics on this show, so you're not going to hear any like fringe commentary or strange conspiracy theories. Just reliable information that you can put to use right now to help keep you and your family safer. And I hope you enjoy the show. And if you do enjoy the show, would you do me the favor of sharing it on social media with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your relatives, all of those people that are important to you? Tell them about the show. I'll even suggest a tweet or a message you can put out. You can talk about, hey, there's a lot of really great information on the show. That'd be good. That'd be a good one. Or you could say, wow, the host is really awesome. That would be another great social media thing you could put out on tweet. You can maybe get a picture of me from the internet and put it out on Instagram. That'd be cool. You could say something like, oh, he looks like James May. That would be another great share to put out on social media. Am I sort of getting the point across? Yeah. Okay. Please share this show. Share the great information that we put out with your friends and your family, everybody that you care about. I'm sure that they'll appreciate you for turning them on to such great information. And welcome to our first show of 2018. I don't know if you can hear this or not. My chair is squeaking tonight, and I thought I had that fixed, but I guess not. There it goes. See, you can hear that. So my apologies for the squeak. Apologies for the squeaking chair here, but we are starting off 2018 with our first show. This is the third year as we start with Training Talk here on Personal Defense Network, and I'm going to bring you some more great shows, information that you can use and put to use in your life and share with others as well. I do want to point out before we get started that, of course, Training Talk is free. You can watch it. You can share it. Everybody sees it because it's on the public side of Personal Defense Network. We do have another section of the site of the organization, and that's the premium membership side at Personal Defense Network. Of course, on the public side, we've got lots of free articles, lots of free videos, the shows like this and like Rob Pincus's live show once a month. But on the membership side of Personal Defense Network, we have so much more. We have full length, like DVD length videos. We've got special discounted access to the online classes that we offer here. And if you haven't checked out our online classes, that's growing all the time. Special videos that you don't see, of course, a lot of collaborations, just all kinds of material on the membership side of Personal Defense Network. Now, how can you get access? Well, you just sign up for yearly access. Now, it's usually $39.95 a year, but because you're watching the show, you can get a deal. How would you like your first year of premium membership at Personal Defense Network for only $10? Your first year of premium membership for only $10. Well, you can get it simply by clicking on any of the links on the site that talk about sign up for premium membership. And when you get to the checkout procedure, there's a little box there where you can put in, I can't remember if it says discount code or coupon code, but it's pretty clear what it is. Put in this code, Grant10, GRANT, the number 1, the number 0, all one word, Grant10, put that in, and you'll get your first year of membership, premium membership here at Personal Defense Network for only $10. And it's just an incredible deal. I've heard from a number of people who have taken advantage of this deal, and they're just ecstatic about it. So sign up for that. Sign up if you have some loved ones, maybe sign them up. And you'll have, like I said, your first year, and it's full access to premium membership, not restricted or not timed, anything like that. It's a regular premium membership for $10 for your first year. So check that out. Take advantage of that. So for our first episode, of 2018. It's gonna take a while to get used to saying 2018. 2018 for our first episode of 2018. I want to look at a news item that happened over Christmas time and take a look at it. And this is something we've never really talked about on the show. At least we've never devoted a lot of time to talking about the appropriate use of lethal force on this show. And I bring this up because there was a tragedy. I'm going to look at the news article here because this came out of a little town in Alabama. And on Christmas Eve, a 22-year-old fellow who was going to college, I guess, came home for the holidays, as a lot of kids do. He was studying music, wanted to be a country western star, and came back home for the holidays. And on Christmas Eve, borrowed his dad's car to go somewhere. And his dad was working outside in the garage on something, and apparently wasn't aware that his son had borrowed his car. And when he heard his pickup, I guess, driving out the driveway, he ran out of his workshop with his gun, fired a warning shot into the air. When the truck didn't stop, he shot at the tailgate of the truck. The truck stopped, and he ran. I guess it's kind of a long driveway. He ran down the driveway, pointing the gun at the truck and yelling for the driver to get out. And only when he got up to the truck did he realize that it was his son who was driving, and his son was dead. He had, one of the bullet that he shot at the tailgate had apparently gone through and struck his son. His 22-year-old son died on the scene on Christmas Eve. And this is a tragic case, and I don't understand that I don't mean to make light of the family's tragedy. I can't even imagine the father and the mother and the rest of the family, how they're suffering with this. And I certainly don't want to accuse the father unnecessarily, but the tragedy of this incident isn't really so much that he shot his own son, but that this kind of situation happens surprisingly frequently around the country. And what I hope is that the shocking nature of this will help people to maybe pay a little more attention to the things we're going to be talking about tonight. And so I shared this story on social media and made a few small comments about it. And our friend and PDN contributor, Aaron Israel from Fundamental Defense, wrote a blog post about it. And so I thought I'd have him on the show and to look at this incident and to see what we can learn from it to hopefully keep this from happening to anybody's son. So Aaron, you there?
I'm here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming on again. I wish we weren't talking about something so sad.
Definitely.
So is there anything that I left out of the story that you might remember?
No, you pretty much covered it.
Okay. So let's look at, I think the first thing to do, we know what happened. So I think what I'd like to do first is to take a look at what went wrong in this incident. And, take a look at what the father could have done better. And then maybe look at what this means for all of us when we're dealing with crime that happens in front of us, or what we think is crime happening in front of us. So, boy, where to start here?
Yeah.
So I guess The first thing is the truck is going down the driveway, and the father runs out of his workshop. Um, and I think the intention, and I understand this. I think the intention is probably to confront the thieves, to maybe stop the crime, I guess, if possible. What's your read on that?
Well, I understand, like you said, I understand the instinct to want to do that, and that's why I stress to my students to think through these scenarios ahead of time, because the emotions of what happens in the moment can sometimes lead you to do some things that might be not the best decision. And just from that perspective, you can understand why he did what he did, but it was the wrong move, because if you know that he's, you think somebody's getting in your truck, you think they're leaving with your vehicle, you're not in any danger at that point if you're inside the garage or inside the house or in some kind of position of cover where you're not exposed to whatever you perceive the threat is. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to put yourself in danger unless you have some kind of compelling reason to do so, because maybe you're trying to protect someone else's life, or you're afraid baby's in the car or some crazy thing like that. But knowing that it's just a car that is empty in the driveway and it's taken off, and that's all we know from the story, it doesn't make a lot of sense to expose yourself to potential danger. Because if it is a violent criminal out there and you don't know what their rap sheet is, what they're capable of, they could just as easily turn around and start taking shots at you, and either kill you, or bullets go into your house and hit somebody that's inside your house. All kinds of bad things can happen. There's a lot more negative outcomes than the potential positive outcome of just stopping them and having the police come, when you could just call the police anyway. So what he should have done is, if he's worried about his truck getting stolen, stay in that position of cover, get to a better position of cover if you can, and call the police and let them do what they do.
And I'm glad that you brought up that there is a real emotional component to this, and having been the victim of a crime myself many years ago, where I had an office in an office building, and I had foolishly left my briefcase. It was, there was an inner office and an outer office kind of thing. And I'd foolishly left my briefcase in the outer office, with the door unlocked, and somebody popped in the door, grabbed it, and ran off. And I had literally gone to the inner office for maybe 30 seconds. So, it took 30 seconds for this person to do it. And of course, the first thing I did is run out in the hallway and look up and down the hallway and run outside to see if I could spot them so I could take off and chase them. And there is that, it's an odd feeling. It's like, I have to do something. So I'm going to do something, even if it is wrong. Right. Yep. Because you've been victimized. You feel like you've been victimized. You really want to do something. But in reality, there's the old story about, the dog chasing a car and not knowing what to do with it once he caught it.
Yes.
And it's kind of the same thing. I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know if there were, one person, two people, I had no idea. And I had no idea what I was going to do when I caught them. Was going to yell at them. Was I going to punch them? Which is a really stupid thing to do, because I was very young at the time, and I had no idea how to fight, but there was that immediate feeling that, oh my God, I have to do something. And so fighting that emotional reaction, I think, is the first thing. And fighting that emotional reaction, interesting enough, is the first thing in a lot of incidents, even if we're talking medical emergency.
Sure.
Fighting that emotional response is the first thing you have to do. And the same is true when we're dealing with a crime, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they get hung up on, they get the emotional response and they sympathize with the guy, and who wouldn't? We all value our property, especially as Americans, is a fundamental thing for where a lot of our rights come from. And so you don't want to, you hear people or you see people on the internet say, well, that's my thing, I worked hard for, all that. I understand all that, but people don't think about the possible outcome of you don't win the fight. They just think, okay, I instigate fight, I win, bad guy loses, I get to keep my thing, and whether you have any value on the bad guy's life, you got to value your own life, and there's no guarantee that you're going to walk away from that. So unless you're willing to bleed out for your truck, then there's no reason to put yourself in danger. So
I think that's a great point. And I tell this to my students like this, that in any defensive incident, in any encounter with a criminal or attacker, there is a greater than zero chance that it's not going to go your way.
Yep.
However you want to define that, our friend Claude Warner calls it a negative outcome. Whatever is not good for you, there's a greater than zero chance of that happening. And I think everybody needs to understand that that's a very real possibility.
Yep.
So let's talk about, of course, responding to this incident with the firearm, because he ran after the truck, fired a warning shot in the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's that emotional thing. I have this tool in my hand. I have to do something with it. Maybe I can intimidate the person. So fire a shot into the air. Maybe that will stop them. So we're still dealing with that emotional reaction here, aren't we?
Very much so. Yeah, that's another thing that we obviously tell our students not to do, because you fire that warning shot and maybe that's enough to deter the criminal, get them to stop what they're doing. But where that bullet goes is your responsibility too. And that could easily, go down the street and, hit a neighbor's kid who's playing in the backyard. There's all kinds of stories about that happen every year. So, warning shots are a bad idea, and another usually emotional response to a situation that, if you don't think about it ahead of time, humans are likely to make those kinds of rash decisions in the moment.
And let's talk about here at this point, you fired a warning shot, regardless of whether the shot was aimed at someone or not. It's still the use of lethal force. And this is kind of an important thing to remember. Just because you weren't aiming at something specifically doesn't mean that the use of that firearm was justifiable, even legally. Because if the situation is such that you were not in personal danger, firing a warning shot under those circumstances is generally not justifiable. It's in fact, there are, I've noticed in the last year, a lot more prosecutions for people firing warning shots when there was no need for them to fire a gun at all in the incidents. Have you noticed the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in Texas, where you get a lot of people that comment and say, "Hey, I'm from Texas, and our law says X, Y, and Z," and they'll post Chapter 9 of the Penal Code word for word. And the black letter law is what the black letter law is, but the way it gets applied in court is very subjective, and it depends on the jury of your peers. It depends on what the prosecutor's read is on the situation, how they interpret that black letter law as it applies to your situation. And so even if you think that you're justified in using that kind of deadly force by firing a warning shot, you may end up in court having to pay a lawyer all kinds of money to prove that you were in fact justified by the black letter law as you think it should be interpreted. So it's not like they just take a statement at the scene and you're done. I mean, you're talking about court costs and legal battles, even if you think you can justify it in your locality. So, and a lot of the times, like you said, the prosecutor ends up making a good enough case that you end up in jail. So
after the warning shot doesn't work, the truck doesn't stop it. And keep in mind, we're still in this state where, or this situation where, if the truck did stop, what do you do then? So, and we have to keep that in mind. What would you do if the truck in fact stopped? And then the man fires a shot at the truck itself. Of course, we don't know what his idea was, I don't know. Was he thinking he's going to stop the truck by firing at the tailgate? I don't know. He hasn't really made a statement, but you know, if you're worried about a vehicle being stolen, and perhaps it's a vehicle that you don't have insurance on, so you don't have theft coverage,
Right.
but and maybe you're afraid of the entire loss of the truck for whatever reason. But let's say it is insured against theft. Putting a hole in the tailgate is probably going to cost more to repair than your deductible. So
Yeah.
the reasoning doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's just an angry response, just like we've talked about up to this point. It's an emotional response to you're mad that somebody's getting away with your property, and you feel like you have to do something, and so you got this firearm in your hands that you've decided to pick up and run out the door with, and you can't see clearly that there's a threat that you have to deal with, but you still feel like I got to do something, so I've got this tool in my hand that makes bullets go at things, and so you use that thing. That's very, very emotional chain of events there that doesn't stand up to the logic test, but your logical brain is not functioning real well in that moment if you haven't thought about things ahead of time. So.
And I hesitate to say this, because I really don't want it to be taken the wrong way, but um, I think television movies probably have a little bit to do with this as well, because I think a lot of people watch. I think a lot of people get their self defense and gun information from Hollywood,
For sure.
right? The Hollywood Tactical School, and in a lot of cases, they see these things on TV or in the movies where somebody shoots the vehicle and the vehicle stops. The guy gets out, and of course, then they have a fist fight, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what always happens in the
Mm-hmm.
movies. And I think sometimes there's this irrational idea that shooting at the vehicle makes it stop.
Yeah, I mean, there was an incident in actually in Fort Worth about I want to say a year and a half, 2 years ago, where a guy confronted someone who had just shot his girlfriend inside of a drugstore, and he stepped in front of the guy's car, pointed his gun at the guy's car, hoping the guy would get out and surrender, and he could call the police. And the guy got out and shot him in the head, and that was it. He drove off with the car that he was in, and the good Samaritan who was trying to intervene was there bleeding out with his family sitting in the Suburban right across the parking lot from him. So, I mean, the idea that it's going to go exactly how you planned. I mean, he didn't have any idea what he was going to do when the guy got out of the car, obviously, because his "I'm going to point the gun at you" plan didn't work. And then when it didn't work, he didn't have anything thought out past that, and it was a bad outcome. And that's what people don't think about, is the negative outcome, that you could be the one who loses that fight.
And I think and again, that's a good thing to reiterate, that particularly when the situation has not progressed to the point that the use of lethal force is really warranted, i.e. there's no real danger to you or another innocent person yet. Introducing that firearm, in fact, escalates the incident. And now you have a situation where you have made a chess move, and you have to be prepared for what the other person's move may be. And the other person's chess move may be to, knock the king over.
Yep.
And, you can't predict that. You don't know what's going on. It's a little easier when the guy comes up to you, pulls a knife. You say, "Oh my God, I got to deal with this." Move off the vector of attack. Draw your gun. That's a fairly canned response that of course we teach in a lot of classes. But when there's that, well, he's not really a threat yet, so I'm going to introduce my gun to keep him from becoming a threat. What do you do if he escalates then? And these are the things that anyone who uses a firearm in self-defense needs to think about and needs to understand.
Yes.
Yeah, this is just not very cut and dry. So let's say that, let's put ourselves in the father's shoes. I was trying to think of the word shoes. Let's put ourselves in the father's shoes right now. He's working his workshop. Christmas Eve, wrapping presents, probably whatever. Not that I wrap presents because I let my wife do that because I can't wrap presents worth a damn. But let's say for some reason we're out, in our workshop there, maybe out in the garage doing stuff, and you hear, we hear our vehicle start up and drive away, and we're not expecting anybody to be using the vehicle. So what would you do? What's the sequence of events that you would follow?
Well, first off, if I'm by myself and I'm not expecting anybody to be taking my truck, it would stand to reason that I might think that, hey, somebody's taking my truck. And if my wife's in the house or something like that, or if I've got my phone by me, I might text my wife and be like, hey, somebody coming to get this. Is that you? You taking the truck? Whatever. But if I don't have that option, it stands to reason that I might have that thought like the father did of, hey, somebody's trying to steal it. So if that's the case, then I'm going to get to wherever I can where there's a phone if I don't have it on me, and I'm going to call 911, and I'm going to tell the cops, hey, somebody's stealing my truck out of my driveway. And I'm going to give them a description and say, hey, my truck looks like this. This is the license plate. This is my address where it's leaving from. It's headed east on whatever road. Give them as much info as I can, and then let them make that traffic stop and hopefully get my truck back. So, because that's really the outcome I'm hoping for anyway, even if I was to confront the guy, is that I get to keep my property, right? Like, because since I'm a rational human being, I don't want to kill somebody just for the sake of, protecting my truck. So if the goal is keep my truck, then I'm going to take the route that puts me in the least amount of risk possible to my own life and still hopefully be able to keep my truck. I've got just as good a chance of keeping the property if I let the police deal with it as I do if I go out and confront the guy myself. So that'd be the smart option to take, and that's what I would do.
I like that. I would probably do very much the same thing, with the singular exception that rather than texting my wife, I would probably run into the house yelling, honey, are you taking the truck? Are you taking the truck? And if I didn't get an answer, then I would probably call the police.
Yeah, sure. There you go.
I think that's probably the only change I would make. I might run outside if it takes that to see what direction the vehicle's going. Or if I can see well enough to get a description of the driver, I might do that. I would hope at least that I would be careful to do so from a position of concealment so the bad guy doesn't see me, and get the best description I can and then call the police. And I think that's the rational approach, to this incident. Any other possible good course of action? I can't think of any other good course of action other than that. Can you?
No, I think that's really the best thing to do. I mean, if you're inside your house, like behind a door, not in an attached building or something like that, look out the window. Use that as a good place of concealment. Don't expose yourself to that, that front drive or that front area, whatever, because, you're just putting yourself in more danger. But if you're out in the garage like this guy was, like you said, get behind some cover, concealed position and try to get a description. But that's as far as I'd go as far as going outside. So
I think it's worth noting here that a lot of the newer cars, certainly those built in probably the last 10 years. A lot of vehicles today have, of course, GM has OnStar, Toyota's got something similar, Nissan's got something similar. A lot of different manufacturers do. If you subscribe to those services, one call to these services, they can tell you, where it is, and they can even disable the vehicle.
Yeah, and like I've said that on, in response to some of the comments I've gotten on my blog posts, and I get people that say, well, I can't afford OnStar. And I'm like, okay, well, if you can't afford OnStar, then you can't afford to risk your life either. I mean, I don't have LoJack on my truck because I don't value it that much, and it is expensive. But that being said, if I don't value it enough to put LoJack on it, I certainly don't value it enough to put my life at risk to protect it. So, if you really value your stuff that much, there are things you can do to secure your vehicle and your other possessions that make these things less of a problem for you. So,
in fact, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's an avenue that I want to go down. The idea that I can't afford to lose my vehicle. I can't this, whatever the item is, it doesn't even have to be a vehicle, but with vehicle, it seems to be the most common thing. I can't afford to lose the vehicle. So of course you mentioned that, you don't want to risk your life over just a vehicle. Let's back up just a little bit from the ultimate negative outcome, and let's say that let's take this case. Let's say, of course, the worst outcome is that you shoot your own child. Let's say that it's not your child; it is somebody who is in fact stealing your vehicle, and you do this. And we'll take it a step further here in a minute. But let's say you do this, you kill the guy who's stealing your vehicle, or you severely injure him. You're probably going to end up in court, if not criminal court, certainly civil court. And yeah, I know there are some states where the laws prevent that. Okay, great. I suggest you read the laws a little more carefully, because they don't say what you probably think they do. I'll just put that out.
Yes, Texas guy. Texas guy.
I can think of a few other guys too. But let's say that you've done this. You're certainly going to face at least a criminal investigation. And as our friend Aaron Craig found out in his incident, he didn't even shoot anybody, and it cost him a job. It cost him lots of money and lots of time out of his life for a relatively innocuous incident. You shoot someone and kill them, you're going to take a lot of time out of your life. Chances of you losing your job are quite high. Chances of you not being able to find another job right away are quite high. The chances of needing an attorney to help you out of this are almost certain. And this is before we even talk about a civil litigation. So the question comes down to, is that $4,000 or $5,000 car that you couldn't afford to lose, and you couldn't afford to insure, and you couldn't afford on sort of all that other stuff, is that worth all of this other expense that you might go through should this happen?
Yeah, I talk about that a lot in my blog. I talk first a little bit about the moral end of it, which I think we'll get into here in a minute. But just like you said, I mean, even just looking at it from a practical, I'm doing, X's and O's and, making a risk versus benefit decision. It just doesn't make any sense, because the potential risks of taking a life, if that happens, or even seriously injuring somebody, far outweighs the benefits of keeping that truck or keeping whatever that piece of property is, because there's just too many variables that you can't control after the fact that you might have to go through. I mean, it's probably not going to be as cut and dry as you think it is. And, the more you read about case law and people who've actually been through these circumstances, even when they're completely justified and had no other choice, I mean, it's a really difficult thing to deal with, after the fact. So I don't see any way that you make that decision rationally when you look at the risks and the benefits.
So I said, I kind of warned that we would take this up just a little notch. There was a case about 1.5 years ago now, I think, and I don't remember where it happened. It might've been Texas. Fellow sees his car being stolen out of his driveway. He grabs his gun, runs to like the sidewalk, and starts launching rounds at this vehicle, literally launching rounds, because he fired several shots at the rapidly departing vehicle. I don't know if any of them hit the vehicle, but one of them did travel a couple of blocks through the wall of a neighbor's house and into the head of a woman who was sleeping there, and killed her instantly. This is a case where he didn't end up stopping the crime at all, and ended up killing an innocent bystander. And without a doubt, in fact, I think he was finally sentenced. He's going to spend time in prison. Whatever finances, whatever assets he had are gone, because they went to pay the attorneys to defend him in this. And I suspect there will probably be some sort of a civil suit down the road. I would be shocked if there wasn't.
No doubt.
So let's say it was a $50,000 vehicle, which would be an expensive vehicle. Is a $50,000 vehicle worth that?
No, just based on the way people drive those things, probably not. Yeah, I don't see any way that you stack up the potential, the human factor of it, the financial factor of it, the reputation, what it's going to do to your family, the fact that even if you don't get convicted, there's going to be the civil court after that. Even if you don't face any fines in civil court, you're going to be the guy who, potentially killed an innocent bystander or shot someone who didn't need to be shot. And, that's going to color the whole rest of your life, whether you think it is or not. And, is it worth it to deal with that stigma that comes with that just to save your vehicle?
I think it was Masad Ayub who pointed out that realistically, if you have to defend yourself in a criminal case for the use of lethal force, the retainer is $100,000 for most attorneys. It's around $100,000, and it might be higher. So, unless you're driving Rolls Royces, the cost benefit thing just doesn't work out at all.
Nope.
More importantly, though, we've been talking about, and I think that one thing that we haven't perhaps hammered home enough yet. We talked about the non-zero chance of a negative outcome in any defensive incident. Doesn't matter what it is. There's a greater than zero chance that things will not turn out your way. But we've talked about shooting at, in this particular case, fleeing cars. And I think a lot of people have perhaps this in their mind that, this might be justified because maybe this person just killed somebody, or there was a heinous crime and you were trying to stop a fleeing felon. I think it's important to point out here that that's not what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about here is shooting at somebody who took something from you. Nothing heinous. We're talking about a possession. It's a possession in the same way that my water bottle here is a possession. This is something that I have, that I use frequently. But just like my vehicle, just like my television, it's a possession. So the question is, and here we're probably going to get into a little more philosophy. The question is, do I introduce lethal force to stop somebody from taking this from me? And that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about ultimately we're talking about using the threat of death to keep someone from removing something from our possession, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't see any circumstances philosophically where you can justify to me. Now, I mean, you can come up with some kind of wild hypothetical, just like you can on anything, that I'm sure we could, go round and round about, something ridiculous that's way off base. But in general, you have firearms and you have the ability to use deadly force and the right to protect your life, to protect the life of your family members, to protect the life of someone who's in danger, who might be a third party in certain circumstances. But it's the life component that matters. I mean, I don't even like it when we say home defense, because you're not defending your home, you're defending the people that are inside your home if you need to in that circumstance, right? So it's not the house that you're defending or anything that's inside of it that's a material thing. It's the living, breathing people inside of it. So if there's no human life at risk, me personally, and I think most rational people in a civil society would say that there's not a thing that you own that is worth taking a human life for. And even if you disagree with that, like you hear, internet chest thumper guys say, hey, they made a bad decision about coming after my stuff and they deserve what's coming to them. Okay, that's fine. Do you value your life because of the negative outcome thing, right? So if you value at least your life enough that it's more important than your stuff, then, I think that, from a philosophical standpoint, it's just not worth taking the risk and introducing deadly force unless you absolutely have to, because life is at stake.
I really like that approach. Is because there is always greater than zero chance of a negative outcome. Is what I'm about to do worth the potential loss of my life? And interestingly enough, I think that would keep a lot a lot of this from happening. If this situation goes sour, is what started this worth my dying, my leaving my family destitute, leaving my kids without a father or mother, as the case may be? um, is is this situation worth that? And not just your death, but perhaps your imprisonment, which is almost the same thing.
Yeah.
Is this situation worth getting into? And I like that. I like that approach. I think that's a rational way to look at it.
Yeah, it gives a lot of leeway for people who don't want to. And I understand where they're coming from. You hear about criminals getting off from, and I always get, when I bring the subject up and I lay out my philosophy, I sometimes get accused of sympathizing with the bad guy, and that's not the case. I'm not saying that I feel bad for somebody if they do get shot when they're trying to steal something. It's not that. That's not the case at all. What I'm saying is that, it's the fact that you're putting your life in danger that I want to keep you from doing that, because I care about your survivability. I'm not so much concerned about theirs. So when you frame it that way, I think a lot of people who, and I'm probably going to disagree with them anyway about the life of the criminal, they can at least value their own life and their family's life enough to say, okay, I'm more important than stuff, and therefore, since I could be the one who's bleeding out, it's not worth it. So
I think that's a really good approach. I think that cuts through a lot of the, internet BS from Tough Guy 37.
Yeah.
I'm going to get, by the way, I'm going to get a Facebook username that's Tough Guy 37.
You should.
I need to. I really need to. So I like that approach. I think it's a very rational way, and I think that's a way that I think most people will understand. Let's another part of this, and the thing that I like to explain to people when we're talking about this idea of the use of force to protect things, right?
Yeah.
And of course, lots of people will opine about how much they hate thieves. They don't want thieves to get away with stuff. That's, the root of our societal decline and all that kind of thing. And I want to be very, very clear. I don't like thieves any more than anybody else does.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, do you like thieves?
No, I don't like thieves.
Nobody likes thieves. I don't like them. You don't like them. Nobody likes thieves. Nobody wants to see thieves get away with doing thief things. I mean, it's just, we don't. But at the same time, I also value human life above everything else. The same way that I would want people to value my life above everything else. And some people refer to this as the golden rule. But that which is hateful to others, hateful to you, don't do to others.
Yeah.
And I would hope that my respect for human life would be respected by other people in a civilized society. So the question I always ask people is, let's say we had a situation, and I think you and I discussed it before the show, a situation about 2 years ago, maybe a little over, and I want to say this was in Florida. I'm not absolutely sure, where a teenager, like a 17 or 18-year-old kid, was doing some car prowls, and he wasn't even really breaking into cars. He was just looking for cars with open doors and going through the consoles and the glove compartment and stealing what he could. And guy confronts kid in his driveway. And if I remember the story correctly, the kid was still in the car when the guy shot him dead where he stood. Of course, all the Tough Guy 37s on social media and on the internet, oh, this is a wonderful thing. He got what's coming to him, and damn thieves, we got to stop them early, this sort of thing. And in response, I would ask this: what if that were your 17-year-old kid doing something stupid? We all did stupid things when we were 17. Even you, Aaron. I know you did stupid things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely did.
We did stupid things when we were 17. That's what teenagers do. They do stupid things. I was like the most straight-laced kid in the world, and I did stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
Would you, for those people that opine that shooting thieves is an okay thing, would you be okay with somebody shooting your son or your daughter at 17 years old for doing something stupid like car prowling? And I suspect there are very, very few people out there who, when the tables are turned like that, would say yes.
Yeah, and I used to discuss this a lot when I taught licensing classes here in Texas, and it was always aimed at the people who really focused on what they think they can get away with based on the black letter law versus what I was telling them they ought to do, like we're talking about. And one of the parts of the black letter law in Texas says that it's justifiable for you to use deadly force to prevent criminal mischief after dark, right? Well, criminal mischief after dark could be somebody TPing your front yard, right?
Yeah,
Like
isn't
I've
that
had
like
my yard.
graffiti, right?
Yeah, it's like graffiti, TP in your house, kicking your Christmas decorations over, stuff that kids do. And I'm like, okay, so if you want to live on the edges of what you can get away with, would you shoot somebody for knocking over your Frosty the Snowman? I mean, because it says that you can technically. Do you want to go to court and defend yourself after you've done that? And then they start to think, oh, no, that would be ridiculous. And I'm like, okay, well, if that would be ridiculous, then how come, shooting somebody who's prowling through your glove box like you're describing would be less ridiculous? They're still just going after stuff, right? They're committing that little petty theft. Is that really worth ending someone's life and having that dead person on your conscience who maybe is your neighbor's kid or somebody who plays football with your son or something like that? You don't want that on your conscience. And I think when they look at it that way, rational people will be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense now. So.
Yeah, the yeah, criminal mischief after dark. Yeah, TPing would, when I probably shouldn't say anything, but when my wife was younger, she had been known to TP a house or two when she was in high school. And if she ever caught me telling this, she would like slit my throat while I sleep or something. But as you're talking about that criminal mischief after dark, that would certainly cover my wife's TPing parties when she was a kid, and how awful it would have been for somebody to shoot her because she was throwing some Charmin up in somebody's tree.
Yeah.
Sad situation. We're talking, and you brought up the idea of can I versus do I need to? And I want to amend that, and I've amended this a little bit very recently, based upon a comment somebody on social media made about this story. And he came up with one of those hypothetical situations. He says, well, under those conditions, I would want to use lethal force.
Yeah.
And I said, that's an interesting word choice, because it's not whether you can or whether you want to. It's a matter of whether you need to. And those are very different things, aren't they?
Very much. Yeah. I mean, if I had my druthers, sometimes there's all kinds of things I want to do that I shouldn't do. Like, sometimes when I'm at a movie and somebody's making too much noise at Star Wars, I want to turn around and punch them in the face. But if I do that, I'm probably going to feel bad about it afterwards, and I'm probably going to go to jail too. So there's all kinds of want to that, we as adults with rational functioning brains have to deny our impulses, right? So if you're just going to act on impulse, then, you probably shouldn't own a gun. That's the bottom line. And so if you don't have good impulse control, then you're a far cry from needing to carry a gun around in public, in my opinion. So
I think that's true. Sometimes I think and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here.
Right.
But I think that there are instances, I think there are people out there who perhaps fantasize a little bit about the idea of using their gun to stop a crime. And that's where we get to that, when can I shoot someone sort of question. When can I shoot someone means that I really want to shoot someone, but I know there are constraints against me doing that. So when do I get permission to do so? And that's how it always comes across to me. It's really about when you need to use lethal force to prevent the loss of your life or the life of another innocent in the incident. That's when you need to. And it's not when you can, because if we talk about when you can, we get into the thing, especially again with the Texans, we get into that statute argument about being able to use lethal force against someone performing criminal mischief after dark. All right. That's okay. I guess technically you can, but do you need to? And the answer is, well, of course not. I don't think any rational person would say that that's a situation where you need to.
Yeah. And I think, again, an example I use as far as, I think, I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but that fantasy of getting into the gunfight, because you've seen a million movies, you see that a lot in like really green recruits in the military, and then when you talk to the hardened combat veterans who've actually been in gunfights and have had to take human life and have watched people die, they're more about, man, do I have to do this? Do we have to go on this patrol? Is this really necessary? Whereas the guy who just showed up in theater might be like, hey, let me at him type of attitude. So if even those guys who are, highly trained and they're over there fighting real bad guys who are trying to kill them all the time, if even they think about, okay, is this really necessary for us to do this? Then it ought to be even more incumbent on you as somebody who's an American citizen worried about protecting yourself from deviants in our society. If they're having that same mentality, even in like a combat theater, right? And I think that's something a lot of people don't consider.
I think you're probably very, very correct about that. I think there probably is that sort of fantasy undercurrent. And sometimes I think in the training business, sometimes I think we maybe reinforce that where we shouldn't.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Because everything that we always talk about is shooting, and we don't really talk enough about not shooting.
Yeah.
And so perhaps, and I don't know what the answer to that is, because I think that you and I and other thoughtful people in this business are always looking for ways to teach these lessons to our students and hopefully get them to maybe think about this stuff before they actually do it, which is really hard, isn't it?
Very much so. Yeah. To get people to really think about the things ahead of time and really consider all of the possible outcomes, not just the one that they fantasize about, but what could go wrong is, and that's why Monday morning quarterbacking is so important. Like Rob Pincus talks about, and honestly gets a lot of flack about, is, hey, well, you're just Monday morning quarterbacking and dissecting this incident. You weren't there. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing, because I want to look at it from every angle so that if I'm ever in a similar situation, I can make a better decision than this guy did. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everything they did was wrong, but what are the things they could have improved on, so that if I'm ever there, I've already had that mental rep and hopefully, I do better. So,
and in fact, I want to attack that whole Monday morning quarterbacking thing right now. Because the concept of Monday morning quarterbacking are people who do not know about the subject talking about something they don't know, and second guessing people who know more than they do, who were there at the time. So like, 4 different things.
Good point.
As defensive training professionals, you and I, and the other contributors here at Personal Defense Network, when we're talking about incidents like this, it's not Monday morning quarterbacking. It's more like, National Traffic or the Federal Aviation Administration, investigating a plane crash and learning learning what went wrong and how we can keep it from happening in the future. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about professionals looking at a situation, deriving whatever lessons we can from it based upon the information that we can get. Yeah. That's not Monday morning quarterbacking, folks. That's analysis. That's thoughtful analysis. It's critical examination of the things that happen, and then deriving lessons that we can take to our students, to you here who are watching this show or here on reading the stuff here on Personal Defense Network. We analyze this stuff. We look at it from the standpoint of a certain amount of expertise, and using that expertise to understand what happens and then to convey that to people who maybe don't have that expertise. That ain't Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yep.
So yeah,
Good point.
That just bothers the crap out of me when somebody says,
I can
well, you're
tell.
Monday morning quarterbacking. Yeah, no, you don't know what the term means here. Let me Google that for you. It just ticks me off. Okay, so I've had my rant for tonight. Anyway, so we're running out of time. Any last thoughts on this incident and the lessons that we can learn from it?
Yeah. Just the rule of thumb is that deadly force is not to protect property; it's to protect life. And so, if your life is in danger, it doesn't matter what the criminal's intent originally was. They might have been after your property at the beginning, but whatever they did that put your life in danger, whatever they did that put your life in danger and gave you that reasonable belief that you needed to use deadly force, that makes it about life and not property. So in certain home defense situations where you don't have any other option, they've broken through your barricade, that's still just defending life. You're not defending the stuff at that point. So deadly force, firearms, use them to protect life, and don't put yourself in a situation where you have to do that unless you have some really compelling reason to do so. And just protecting your truck or your jewelry or your grandpa's ashes or your favorite shotgun or whatever the piece of property is, it doesn't really matter. Don't do that, because all the negative outcomes and all things we've talked about. So.
I would echo everything you said, and I would add a couple things to that. First of all, particularly when you're thinking about using the threat of lethal force to stop a petty thief, what if this was your 17-year-old kid doing this?
Yep.
We're not talking about major crimes here. We're not talking about arson or even rape or anything like that. We're just talking about property crimes. If your 17-year-old kid were doing something stupid and somebody shot him, would you be happy about that? I think that's a big takeaway for me. The other thing I wanted, and we didn't really touch upon this, but I think you and I both got these emails and comments on social media. The guy who says, well, what if the person's stealing my tools and I need those tools to earn a living? Yeah. This is 21st century America. And yeah, maybe we don't have the best social safety nets in the world, but I guarantee you, if you're a carpenter or you're a bricklayer or you're a drywaller or anything like that, and somebody steals your tools, I can guarantee you are not going to die.
Yeah.
All right. This is what's important.
Insurance against those things too.
Yeah. Even if you don't have insurance, even if you don't have insurance, you're still not going to die. Yeah. There are a whole bunch of scenarios that happen. People loan you tools, all that kind of stuff. You were not going to die just because somebody stole your hammer. It's just not going to happen. So the idea that there's some level, that there is some category of personal possession that somehow justifies killing another human being because it's going to inconvenience you or cause you a little hardship or something, is just silly. The only exception that I would make, and I can't imagine why anybody would want to steal a medical device that you need for your survival. Okay, that I might go for, but I think that's so implausible as to be.
Yeah, that's the hypothetical fringes I was talking about.
I think that's so hypothetical that I don't even want to entertain it. So yeah, there's nothing that anybody can steal from you that's going to cause you to die. And if it's not going to cause you to die, it's not worth killing another person over. Yep. That's what it comes down to.
Yep.
So, in the just minute and a half we got left, Aaron, tell us about your company, what you do, and how people can get in touch with you.
Fundamental Defense is my company. I teach in Texas, all over the state, primarily in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've got classes coming up in March and May that are already on the schedule, and I'm working on some further on dates for 2018. I'll also be teaching some PDN tour classes, so keep an eye out for those. So if you're in Texas, come see me. And even if you're not in Texas, if you can get to the DFW airport, we'll still take you. So come see us. fundamentaldefense.com for all the classes.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks for coming on tonight and talking about this. It was great to have you on. So just a couple of things before we go, folks. Don't forget the premium membership here at Personal Defense Network. $10 for your first year. If you put this code in, Grant10, Grant, the number 1, the number 0, all one word, at checkout, you'll get your first year of membership, premium membership, for only $10. It's a superb deal. And even if you don't, if you haven't signed up for our free weekly newsletter, there are links all over the site to sign up for that. If you're watching the show on the site page, there's a link down below there where you can sign up for the free weekly newsletter. It keeps you abreast of all the stuff that's going on at Personal Defense Network. I use it to keep in touch with what's going on because there's always something new here. So be sure to sign up for that, even if you're not a excuse me, even if you're not a premium member. That's a great resource to sign up for because it'll lead you to a lot of things. Our next show is 2 weeks from tonight, January the 18th. Again, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here at personaldefensenetwork.com. And of course, you can probably follow us on YouTube and that kind of thing. And we will see you then, again, the 14th, 2 weeks from tonight, which is the third Thursday of the month, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And of course, keep those cards, or those emails rather, coming. We used to say cards and letters coming. Now it's emails coming. Grant at grantcunningham.com. Always happy to hear from you. And of course, my site, www.grantcunningham.com, where you can find my teaching schedule, my books, including my most recent book, Prepping for Life. You can get that there as well. So don't forget that. And remember, share this show with your friends. We'll see you 2 weeks from tonight on the 18th with another episode of Training Talk here at Personal Defense Network. Good night, everybody.